The thing that I always come back to with all this stuff is why, whenever you look at world events, whenever you look at anything that's happening in the modern world these days, that involves the global stage, it's very interesting to ask if this is the option that we have chosen, that we are going to go down. Why is this the preferable option relative to every other possibility in the world? Why is nothing else available and this is the best thing that could have been chosen? What is wrong with our world in such a way, that has caused this situation where we have to do the same wrong things over and over and over again whenever it's important? I mean, if it's not important, then yeah, there might be some room to negotiate. But if it's important, rules get suspended and what's done is done because there is no other alternative. We see this over and over again in these world crises. And so I always come back to, why is the world that we're living in now the preferable one, given all of the other options that we as individuals have pushing forward? Why is this the one that we live in? It just seems to me that over and over again throughout the world, whenever there's an important decision that needs to be made that impacts how we're going to progress as human culture, the question becomes whether or not the status quo should remain or whether or not we should do something entirely different. And I find that over and over again, we pick that whatever keeps the status quo as it is now, whatever keeps the power relationships as they are now, the way that they are now, that is the option that we're going to take. And I just wonder, Bitcoin is an interesting example of this because you have no ability for a small group of people to make the wrong decision over and over and over again. You have the ability for a small group of people, in this case, the miners or the developers or any of these trusted groups, to make a mistake once. But once the mistake is made, then the damage to their reputation is done. The damage, and so there's no incentive to make the same decision when it's the wrong decision over and over again, even if it is better for you personally, because to do so is to essentially throw away everything that you have, that your reputation has built up to. So, that's what I always come back to is why is this the best option? And why is this the one that the world chooses to go with over and over again? And does that continue forever?
It does continue forever. It's the history of humanity, is a history of power plays and establishment of being fought by change. You go back 3,000 years ago and Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and others are talking about youth and the irrationality of youth and how it brings change and how that change is resisted. This is a story that's been told countless times over the millennia. The big difference is that sense of isolation, a historical isolation among communities. We now exist as a global, transnational human culture that transcends borders, with a common cultural understanding that is able to propagate over the internet and generates these common cultural memes, whether those are the anonymous Guy Fawkes mask that you see in hundreds of demonstrations around the world, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's a consensus about the future of humanity, or at least a rejection of some of the structures of the past by a global youth. We're really seeing the emergence of this nascent transnational global culture that has never existed on this planet before. And of course, it's still restricted to only about 2 billion people who have access to the internet and the information content on it. But it's spreading very, very fast. And that changes things, and it changes things rather dramatically.
Question is, though, who fights the change? Because I think that you can look back through history. There's an interesting chart that you can look at of global reserve currencies over the last 500 or 600 years. And you'll notice, looking at this chart, that that each period of time, there's a national currency that lasts about 120 years. And France has had it, and England had it, and Spain. And there have been lots of different dominant world currencies at different periods of history. And you'll notice that it's not that they've done a good job that made it so that they retained dominance for that 120 years. Rather, it's because they had control of empire. And so empire is a monopoly of force, right? It's having the most dominant military ability to reach out and touch someone. And so even though the monetary fundamentals might have suggested a shift away from whatever the currency was at the time based on fundamentals, but not based on the current power structures, you can see that over time those things do degrade. So I wonder, I look at Bitcoin and I look at digital currencies and I say, okay, well, it seems like the problem that digital currencies actually solve is that there's no more empire monopoly. You know, in a world of cryptocurrencies, are we going to have 120-year-long monopolies, or is it going to be different because there's no force to back it up?
I think the big difference is that decentralized information and currency and community scales better than the centralized hierarchical power structures of the past. And that's tipping the scales, to use a double entendre. That's tipping the scales towards decentralization, because the power structures, the centralized power structures of the past, cannot scale both in terms of understanding the information of the world around them and acting on that information, and in terms of scaling their projection of power, information, and propaganda out. And as a result, decentralized systems that scale better are gradually winning against these centralized power structures. That is the defining theme of the century, and I think it's really beginning to show where the two systems, if you like, or the two waves of civilization come into clashes, and it creates dissonance, it creates power vacuums, it creates friction, it creates strife as well. Just like, you know, the transition from agrarian to industrialized economies created strife in the 18th, 19th century. And so now the transition to information economies that are global and decentralized and information societies is going to create strife against the old power structures. But in the end, decentralized systems win. They deliver more value to each node in the network than a centralized system can ever deliver.
And now we're at the point where we don't need to ever go to bloody revolutions ever again. This is a peaceful evolution. And while the powers that be may not like it when their power is disrupted, it's just the natural evolution of where things are going. You know, this is the future, breaking up concentrations of power and decentralizing everything. You know, there used to be this libertarian meme that said privatize everything. You would see it on bumper stickers and stuff. Well, now it's decentralize everything. And anything that can be decentralized will, as David Johnson says.
Yes, I'm not so confident that we won't see significant strife and violence because of the spasms of dying empires, whether those are some of the large global superpowers of this world today, or the transnational networks of power that exist in parallel to them. I
but
think
that's all on the part of governments, though. You know, like all the revolutions throughout history, a lot of what people had to challenge oppressive governments was, you know, guns and political uprisings and, you know, people kind of getting together. But now we don't need that. We have the internet. You know, we have the sort of battle. I hate to even use the phrase of battle or war, but like it's the war for the hearts and minds of people. And when people change their minds, the only person that's still using violence is governments.
This is Chris Joseph bringing you news on Next, the first true second-generation cryptocurrency for April 12th, 2014. A member of the Next community has created a site for dynamic charts related to Next transactions, blocks, and accounts at charts.nxtcrypto.org. The site is still quite new, but can already be used to examine coin distribution, average block generation times, and more. A number of projects have been launched or announced this week. IntMain estimates his work about 20% complete on a Next-based platform for encrypted, decentralized DNS and fully decentralized websites. NextStarter, a crowdfunding site, has presented a plan and is looking for funding, and JL777 is teasing a secret project that could be a big game changer for Next. All of these are being discussed in the forums at nxtforum.org. For more general information on Next, head to nextcrypto.org or mynxt.org, and stay tuned for more news on Next on the next Let's Talk Bitcoin broadcast.